Parents. It's Anna Gallagher again. We are starting a new unit today. It is our multiplication unit. Um, so you can see here in fifth grade we multiply whole numbers and decimals. And there's four things that we'll be going over. The first one is multiplying whole numbers. So in fifth grade, the students should be able to multiply a three-digit number by a two-digit number using the standard algorithm. And what it means by the standard algorithm, it means like how you and I learned how to multiply when we were in the fifth grade. I say that because there's so many strategies, and you might have seen your students use those strategies as well. Things called lattice, a box method, all sorts of those things. They're still allowed to use any of those strategies. It's just in fifth grade, we start to focus on the standard algorithm way, which is if we were doing 23 times 19, it's where when we finish, we have actually multiplied 23 times 19, I might have said 15, 19, and we would get 437. So this should look familiar. The standard algorithm is always, I guess, the basic way that you did your multiplication, so forth. So by fifth grade, they should be able to use the standard way to multiply numbers. Again, if they're still using those other strategies, I want them to, if that's what they feel comfortable with. This, eventually they will move to this, and then by seventh grade, they're using a calculator anyways. So if they're using those other strategies, let them continue to do so, because by seventh grade, they're using a calculator. So it's, the whole point is just really learning the process. So that's multiplying whole numbers. We're going to review that for 2 days. So tomorrow we'll review it again and do some more practice with our multiplying. Then on Wednesday, we're going to move into multiplying decimal patterns. And basically, we explain patterns in the number of zeros of a product when multiplying by powers of 10. So it's starting to understand why our decimal places can move when we're multiplying by them. So we know if we multiply anything by 1, the number stays the same. If we're multiplying by 10, our decimal place has to move one place to the right, so it becomes 32.6. If we're multiplying by 100, we move our decimal place 2 places to the right, so that becomes 326. If we're multiplying by 1,000, same thing. Now we're going to move our decimal point 3 places to the right. So this lesson here is just to get students understanding that decimal points, when we multiply them, can move depending on what we're multiplying. And that's really just kind of the start to understanding that when we're multiplying decimals, we have to move the decimal point back into our answer. So it just kind of gets them understanding that that decimal point is allowed to move. That's Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we will be practicing modeling multiplying decimals. And this is probably something that's a little new to you. It was new to me when I first had to teach it. We multiply 2 different things in fifth grade. We multiply decimals by whole numbers, and we multiply decimals and decimals. When we're modeling those, we usually use a base 10 block to help us. So this problem is 15 hundredths times 2. And we just think of it as repeated addition when we're working with whole numbers. So since we're multiplying by 2, I made 2 groups of 15 hundredths. So when we're multiplying by whole numbers, we should see the groups. When we're multiplying decimals by decimals, we work with overlapping. So it does become a little different. And again, this is helping our students kind of understanding how we get smaller answers when we multiply by decimals. For example, this problem is 4/10 times 5/10. Well, we know that 5/10 is the same as a half, and half of 4/10 would be the 2/10. So students start seeing that, they're used to when we multiply, numbers get bigger. Our products are always bigger. But all of a sudden, when we're doing decimals by decimals, our products start becoming smaller and they don't understand why. This model shows them why. And so that's why we tend to focus on using this model. So to do this one, we highlighted 4/10 in one color, and then we highlighted 5/10 in the other color. Where the two colors overlap, that's our product. That's our answer. So it shows them that because we're taking, in this case, we're taking half, 5/10, half of the 4/10 to get the 20/10. And so it's really shifting their thinking. It can be very difficult, but it helps them understand why when we're multiplying by a decimal point, we can get a smaller answer. Because, I mean, technically we're really multiplying by a decimal is like dividing by a fraction. So I know that's confusing, but that is kind of what we're working with on that one. So just know that's what this model looks like. Main thing is they just need to understand what the models are. So if we're multiplying by a whole number, we're showing groups of and using that repeated addition. If we're multiplying a decimal by a decimal, we're showing the two groups, and where they overlap is our answer. I know that's confusing. I promise it will get easier. It's mainly in 5th grade, just choosing the one that matches. Again, we made another one over here. This one was 2/10 times 2/10. So we created 2/10 in one color. We created 2/10 of the other color. Where it overlaps is 4/100 because we're taking 2/10 of 2/10. And that's where, like I said, they get a smaller answer, but the picture helps them understand why. I'm sorry if that was confusing. I'm trying here to explain it to y'all as well. So that will be this week. Next week, we'll go into multiplying decimals without pictures, without models. And again, we show them several strategies. They could use repeated addition if they're multiplying like by a whole number. Again, going back over this. So if they were doing 24/100 times 3, it'd be 24/100 plus 24/100 plus 24/100. We could use the models like we did in the previous one, again showing those three groups of 22/100. We can use what's called the distributive property, where this is very algebra type, where we're taking 3 and we're multiplying it by both places. So we're taking the 3 and multiplying it by 2/10. We're taking the 3 and multiplying it by 4/100, and then we can add them together. Or the final way is using the standard algorithm, and we really explain to the students how that decimal point moves. So I tell them we have to move it out to make it 24 times 3, and then we have to move it back that same many spaces. So it kind of helps them understand that we can't really multiply decimals by decimals on paper. We still have to do whole numbers, and then by moving our decimal out and moving it back in is how we work with getting the numbers in the correct way. And I've got another example here too, and I usually try to have them use an estimate to help them learn where their place value or where they would place their decimal would go. So in this one was 1.2 times 3.4. And so I, talk about, well, if we were to round this, 1.2 would round to 1, 3.4 would round to 3. What's 1 times 3? 3. So our answer should be close to 3. Then we move that decimal point out, move the decimal point out again. So then it's just like we're doing 12 times 34. We're ignoring those decimal points. We've moved them out so that we can multiply this. Going through the standard algorithm the same way, we would get 408. But then we go back to our estimate. Our estimate was 3. That's because we moved those decimal places out, so we have to move it back in to get our answer. Since we moved 2 places total, we move it back in 2 places. And then that would be our final lesson. So next week, we'll go over multiplying decimals. We'll spend a few days on that as well. And we'll be definitely looking, that would be the next week, going over multiplying decimals, and then we'll have a review, and then we'll test again. So I think that is it. If you have any questions about multiplying whole numbers or multiplying decimals, just let me know. I think this will probably be the hardest to understand. It does shift your thinking from what we learned as kids, and it shifted my thinking as well. It's definitely something, once the kids get have an understanding of it, that they really do understand it a little bit better. But if you see these on homeworks or on assignments, this is what, if it asks you to model, this is what we're looking for, these types of models. But yes, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks and have a great day. Bye.